Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
We went out. We're doing everything in our power to keep the sick and infected people from coming into our country. We're working on that very hard.
Trump on the coronavirus tonight as we're getting an inside look from the Washington Post of his administration's response to the virus thus far. And this gets your attention. Quote, interviews with nearly 24 administration officials, former White House aides, public health experts, and lawmakers, many speaking on the condition of anonymity, portray a White House scrambling to gain control of a rudderless response defined by bureaucratic infighting, confusion, and misinformation. It's complete chaos, a senior administration official said. Everyone is just trying to get a handle on what the expletive, use your imagination, is going on. Meanwhile, officials in Georgia have just since we've been on the air announced 2 new cases of coronavirus. With us for more, Dr. Erwin Redlener, a pediatric physician, co-founder of the Children's Health Fund, now a clinical professor with the School of Public Health over at Columbia University, and the director of Columbia's National Center for Disaster Preparedness with an expertise in pandemic influenza. His business card is 7 inches long. Ron Klain, a political veteran now informally advising the Biden campaign, among his many roles in the White House over the years, working with Dr. Redlener, he oversaw the response to the Ebola outbreak during the Obama presidency. Ron happens to be the co-host of a new podcast about the coronavirus called Epidemic. And Ron, since you guys are colleagues, I'm going to start with you, but ask you both in order to answer the same question. What do you see out there that needs doing, that's not being done? What's perhaps being done wrong?
Yes, I think we're seeing a crisis of both confidence and competence at the Trump White House. The confidence crisis comes from the fact that the president keeps on saying things that aren't true. And he's finally run into an opponent he cannot tweet into submission. The coronavirus is not going to be impressed by Trump's tweets. And so he keeps on misrepresenting the state of the disease. He keeps on misrepresenting the state of progress on things like the vaccine. That erodes the power of his communications on this. On the competence side, the administration put in place travel restrictions to slow the spread of the virus to the United States, but didn't use the time that bought to get this testing problem sorted out, to get our hospitals ready. They're just not moving with pace and speed to put the response into place. So a lot of bad communications and a lot of failure to really execute on the response that should be going underway now.
Doctor, same question.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same basic answer. And I'll tell you that the miscommunication issues are extraordinary. What we witnessed in a press conference just a few days ago was Donald Trump saying everything's under control.
Fictional numbers of patients.
It was just absolutely absurd. And then like 5 seconds later, his health experts saying it's just a matter of when, not if, we're going to get a massive deterioration in the situation. And Trump was promising us a rapid development of the vaccine, which is completely absurd. That's going to be 12 to 18 months, if we're lucky, away. So everything about it totally undermines the public's confidence in messages coming from leaders. What a good leader should be doing is finding that middle ground between telling people what we're doing and what we are worried about, and on the other hand, not creating panic. Trump seems not to have that particular inherent skill that we would like to see in our politicians. And I'm telling you, when the postmortem is written about this whole episode, the incompetencies throughout the federal government have been extraordinary, and I think people would be shocked to see how many errors in judgment, in mismanagement, and so on. And I think Ron mentioned the issue of the testing. That was a unbelievable failure of a competence that we should be having without question. We're so far behind other countries in terms of figuring out how to screen people in large numbers, and there's just no forgiving this.
Let me ask you a question that people ask me, and being a New Yorker, it's probably helpful because as a public health specialist, you get to work in this laboratory every day. How long do you reckon until we really have to change our public behavior?
Well, first of all, we actually have been in a pandemic for some period of time. This is a pandemic, so pussyfooting around that is not helping anyone. We're going to have to change behavior as soon as we hit some trigger points, which have to do with the number of cases in a particular area. And by the way, those public health methods will be very draconian and disruptive for people. Like closing schools, like shutting down athletic events, like closing down theaters on Broadway. These are things that may have to happen if we have to keep people separated so that we don't increase the transmission, of this contagious illness. And when are those going to happen? It's a day-by-day situation, Brian. We don't know. Tomorrow we may get news that there's been a massive increase in the number of cases reported around the country. And we'll start to see health departments saying, listen, we're going to have to close some schools for a while, which has tremendous effects on families. A lot of parents cannot afford to stay out of work so that they can stay home and watch their children. I don't know how we're going to deal with that because families' incomes are dependent on them working. And then the economic consequences in their community and beyond are just absolutely awful. And we have virtually no imagination when it comes to trying to figure out what we're going to do about these secondary and cascading consequences.
It is Tuesday, the 3rd of March of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A small dash, a mere scant pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It does. A small reminder that it is the small things that will really quite enhance your culinary dining experience. And pleasure, too. Well, it looks like we've had some people drop out of the race. See you, Pete, and hi, Amy. Goodbye to you. Thank you for your efforts. Now, I hope you guys will turn over all of your lists to Joe. It looks like Joe's going to be the presumptive winner here. I still like Liz. I still think that Liz has a path, shall we say. But we'll see. We will coalesce. We will come together as a party. And Joe, I gotta say, has a lot of empathy. Let's give him that. His character is really not anything like the mobster in chief. Let's be clear. Joe is a nice guy. And Trump hates nice guys, and apparently so does Vlad. I don't think... Now, I made mention about people are saying that, Joe has decades of baggage. Does he? Well, Trump has decades of baggage that is directly tied to the former Soviet Union characters like Vlad to the present. Now, let's be clear. When Yeltsin was in control, that's when Vlad started making his moves. And who was right there trying to sell Trump steaks and get a Moscow tower? And who had been pretty much associated with some KGB when he married Ivana, whose dad was KGB. Let's be clear about this. The reason that Trump is going after every investigator in the government that has to do with Russia and money laundering with Russia, et cetera, is because of what we already know. We already know this. It's not a secret. It never was. It never was. Okay, so we know exactly what's going on. Trump is a spoiled rich boy brat who could care less about America, and he's been mobbed up with the Russians for decades. I don't want to hear about Joe's baggage. He is a nice guy. We got that going for us. So if they want to bring up Burisma, well, I guess we could bring up the Trump organization that had to be dismantled and his kids barred from ever operating a charity again. Do we really want to bring the kids into it? I have some issues with Joe, but that's for some other reasons. But Joe's a nice guy. Donald Trump is not, and no one apparently in his administration are either. Why else would they approach this coronavirus pandemic in the way they are? Not a technocrat among them. Not even. They got rid of them all because they didn't show enough fealty to dear leader. I'm warning you, it's going to get so bad. The only way to get tested for the coronavirus, and it's not the coronavirus, it's COVID-19. The coronavirus is a misnomer. It's coronavirus. And one reminder, they're going to belittle it and say, well, coronavirus just causes the common cold. Yeah, but COVID-19 can kill you. Shut up. This is what happens when you get rid of science. And you know, Trump's brother apparently teaches or taught at MIT. Well, we know where the brains went in the family then, don't we? Okay, back to the story at hand. Not a technocrat among them. They got rid of them all because they did not show enough fealty, as I said, to Trump's ass. And we will be required to get tested for COVID-19. Or, heaven help us, please, a vaccine or some sort of mitigating factor. I guess we call it a vaccine. Germ killer would be nice. That gets rid of COVID-19 or whatever. We're going to be required. It's not only going to cost about $3,500 just to get a test. And what? I don't know, double, triple for the shots? Yeah, they're trying to, what's holding them up is they're trying to figure out a way to pass through this money to their pockets. But we're going to need 2 forms of ID to get tested or to get a vaccine and to get the vaccine. Your NRA gun license and a certificate where you have actually literally kissed Trump's ass. This is what I don't get. We're not supposed to be touching our noses and mouths, but we're supposed to touch that with our lips? I guess that's showing loyalty then, isn't it? Almost like drinking each other's blood. Almost like dancing with snakes. Singing in gibberish. To show our faith to a higher authority. No thanks. I'm an American. Jeez. Authority? That's to be voted against when they get too authoritarian. Okay, like I said, we got our work cut out for us. Decades of packing the course with Federalist Society law goons. You know, right through the farm clubs in right-wing schools, Liberty University, and others. Koch funded, by the way. Major institutions that we all know and love. Or hate, and always have. Yeah, that too. So, we have our work cut out for us. The institutions, whatever that was, of the great experiment have eroded. But let's remember, they were only fragile gossamer wings to begin with. A mere idea of beauty, truth, and the American way. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, at the top, a Trump aide painted a rudderless coronavirus response inside the White House. Wow, the ship of state without a rudder. Who knew? On the rest of the menu, craven GOP senators ask for more CDC funds after voting to cut them, because they're craven that way. The Supreme Court's decision on Obamacare could hurt the GOP in the 2020 election. Oh, yeah, we can run on health care, especially when coronavirus is probably going to be considered a pre-existing condition not covered by any insurance that Trump wants to give you or let you have. That's more like it. And the coder charged with the largest leak of classified information in CIA history was portrayed as vindictive. Do you think? After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Trump and Pompeo thought they could get the Taliban to agree to one peace deal and the Afghani government to another, like nothing would go wrong. And now our bases are being bombed. Who knew? And half the world's sandy coastlines could vanish by the end of this century, or even earlier than the end. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link that just happens to be at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, right there by the social media scroll, definitely located by Superior Graphic Design, by the way. Well, take a gander to the leftish of the page, and you will notice our Patreon link. And why is that there? Because even though the bulk of what we do here at Resistance Netroots Radio comes out of our own wallets, we would be unable to do this without you, because you are our biggest contributor. Wow, where have we heard that before? Right here at Netroots Radio on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, most every weekday morning. So if you could afford a espresso-type coffee drink once a month and send those funds our way, we are quantum mechanics in our abilities to stretch these dollars beyond, well, quantum mechanic compare. And we've been doing it for almost 9 years now. Continuous 24/7, 365 resistance broadcasting as the founders originally intended all those many decades ago. Probably since the Magna Carta. They knew. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and thank you, Tom. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam, and that would be an okay place to follow me there because I'm there. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that out on social media as, the protocol suggests. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found, mixed in with all the rest of us. We're down in the W's. Who would do that? Well, your intrepid reporter would. That would be me. Or, salon owner. I guess you could call me a salon owner here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I have been a chef owner. I suppose I still am, if you think about it. Okay, well, yes, we have a lot of fun here, don't we? Because, well, we do. let's get into this first op. There's so much. Oh, it's Super Tuesday. Happy Super Tuesday to you. Get out and vote if you haven't already. I like to sort of wait. I'm old-fashioned that way. I remember back in the day, we actually kind of got dressed up to go vote. And it just seemed like, a reverent thing to do. Duty and responsibility and love. I got to say, it's a bit of love, too. And you got to see your neighbors. I actually enjoyed waiting in line to go vote, standing in the morning on a Tuesday with my neighbors. It was fun. Yeah, it was usually the morning. That's when I would get it out of the way. Now that I live in Oregon, we just mail it in, which is great. I think that it has the ability to, maybe keep a little bit of, what did they call it in the old days? Fraudulent activity, I think, at bay. It can still occur, but at least it's at bay. So mailing it in, you don't really get the whole idea of civic involvement when you don't stand in line with your neighbors. Regardless whether I mail it in or not, I like to wait for a while. So all those people who voted, I don't know, maybe they voted for Kamala. I would have. If she was on the ballot by the time you got the California ballot, which I no longer live in. But I would have if probably the opportunity presented itself. But then maybe I wouldn't have, because I'm old-fashioned. I like to wait until, Election Day to see how things shake out. So Amy and Pete have thrown their support behind Joe, and that's good. That's good. I probably like Warren more at this point. Tulsi's still in. She might be in a She might be in a Bernie administration, so you got that going for us. If Bernie happens to be the one, well, then we will get behind him as the one. I sort of like Joe's demeanor a little bit more at this point. Mostly because I know how easy it is to slip into the other sort of combative, bombastic type. Very easily I can slip into that mode. I sort of like Joe's firmness in a sense, and I think that Joe has been a public servant. And Trump has always been a mobster. Bigot mobster. Right-wing, quick KKK, Nazi bigot mobster even. Okay, we better get into the rest of the curated part of the show here. I mean, we are in that segment, so let's look at this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I just could go on and on and on because it just wears you down. It's debilitating, and soon you realize that you probably need a little bit of firmness, but some nice guy instead of tough guy. And he's not even a tough guy. He's a wimp. Trump is just, oh, God. Well, we could go on and on and on and on again about something like that. So let's not. GOP senators have asked for more CDC funds after they, voted against the whole CDC, and they want the money now. And this is out of the American Independent by Dan Desai Martin. I'll get it together, don't worry. Several Republican senators facing tough re-election races, of course, are now clamoring for more federal funds to deal with the new coronavirus outbreak. Well, I keep telling you, mobsters are always playing catch-up, but leaders lead. Obama had all this stuff in place, but the mobsters said, hey, a black guy, piss on that black guy's bed and get rid of every single program the black guy put in, and then piss on that bed again. Last week, Senator Tom Tillis, repug of North Carolina, said that the $2.5 billion proposed by the Trump administration to deal with the coronavirus outbreak may just be a down payment. $2.5 billion down payment. Earlier in the month, Senator Cory Gardner, that repug from Colorado, with the Rockies for the brains, wrote a letter to Congressional Appropriations requesting sufficient funding for both current and potential future efforts to deal with outbreaks. In response to questions about the coronavirus outbreak, Senator Joni Ernst, that pig ball-cutting repug from Iowa, bragged about the size of the CDC budget, saying Congress actually increased Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention and National Institutes of Health funding over the past number of years. And Senator Martha McSally, repug of Arizona, installed because John McCain died. Yeah, she's going to lose. She hasn't won yet, but she's still a senator. She went so far as to ask the CDC to reimburse states and cities for efforts to deal with the coronavirus outbreak. Yet all four senators, along with the most Republicans in the Senate and Congress, voted in 2017 to take $1 billion away from the CDC's Prevention and Public Health Fund when they voted to repeal Obamacare. That same year, the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials warned of, quote, dire consequences, end quote, if the fund were to be eliminated, saying the core public health programs would cease to exist if the Republican-backed bill became law, and it did, and now we're suffering the consequences for a craven grab for permanent power. Ernst, Tillis, and Gardner were senators when they voted to do away with the Prevention and Public Health Fund, and McSally was a member of the House. Both the House and Senate versions of the repeal tried to eliminate the fund. The House-backed bill passed by a 217 to 213 vote with support from only Republicans. The repeal bill failed in a 49 to 51 vote in the Senate, with all 49 votes in support of the repeal coming from Republicans. No Democrats in the House or Senate voted for the repeal. So obviously, the Democrats are the traitors to America, the enemy of the people. Now, on Sunday, the World Health Organization reported 87,137 confirmed cases of COVID-19, and the CDC has confirmed 43 cases in the U.S., resulting in 2 confirmed deaths. I think that's gone up to 6 now. And I got to tell you, it's probably a lot more. Why? Because we have not been testing. Why? Because we only have 75,000 total kits. And of those, over a third are defective because of what they call a manufacturing defect. I wonder what that is. Oh, private enterprise running the show, where the whole motivation is not to make sure a pandemic is stopped in its tracks, but how to hold back services so you can make the most profit. Singer of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The Supreme Court announced it will hear a Republican challenge to fully repeal the Affordable Care Act, bringing health care to the forefront of the election and threatening Republicans' electoral hopes in November. You know, you ask for something, you just might get it now. Because I got to tell you, mobsters always play catch-up, and leaders lead. The Trump administration initially backed the lawsuit from Republican attorneys general across the country, which challenges the ACA, better known as Obamacare. However, the administration has since said the Supreme Court should wait for lower courts to rule, ensuring the ACA would not be fully repealed before the election. Well, Democratic strategists say that in some ways, the fact that the Supreme Court will not make its final decision until after November 2020 may be the worst possible scenario for Republicans. Democratic candidates can remind voters that casting a ballot for Trump or down-ballot GOP nominees could wipe away protections for pre-existing conditions and take away health care from 21 million people. And I guess that would also be maybe your little coronavirus fever. Sorry, no treatment for you. Trump and the congressional and Senate Republicans who have been supporting him got cold feet on their lawsuit to take away everyone's health care, but the Supreme Court just guaranteed that it will be front and center right before the election, Eddie Vail, a Democratic strategist, said. Polling already shows health care is the most important issue for voters this fall, especially in swing states where voters may help to determine the victor. Ultimately, Democratic strategists say the Supreme Court decision will ensure that health care remains the top electoral issue this fall. They are confident that putting Republicans on defense for wanting to repeal Obamacare, which is more popular than ever, with 55% of Americans in support of the law, will hurt Trump and Republicans when it comes to repealing health care and taking away protections for pre-existing conditions. The GOP is far beyond the dog who caught the car, Jesse Ferguson, a Democratic strategist, said. They're the dog who's driving the car, and they're driving Americans' health care right off a cliff. And it looks like right into a sea of coronavirus COVID-19. Jim Mustian of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Oh, did you hear? The Associated Press closed down their Australian office for good. Oh, that's not good. On with this article. A software engineer on trial in the largest leak of classified information in CIA history was prepared to do anything to betray the agency, federal prosecutors said yesterday, Monday, as a defense attorney argued the man had been scapegoated for a breach that exposed secret cyber weapons and spying techniques. A Manhattan jury heard conflicting portrayals of Joshua Schulte, a former CIA coder accused of sending the anti-secrecy group WikiLeaks a large portion of the agency's computer hacking arsenal, tools the agency had used to conduct espionage operations overseas. Well, why just leave it to the CIA? Just let, some foreign actor get it. I mean, is there anything wrong with that? I wonder. Schulte left a trail of evidence despite learned attempts to erase his digital fingerprints. Schulte became disgruntled at the CIA and took meticulous steps to plan and cover up the 2016 theft. This is by the prosecutor's portrayal here. He was the only one who had the motive, the means, and the opportunity to steal the information, prosecutor LaRoche said. He was prepared to do anything to get back at the CIA. Now, defense attorney Sabrina Schroff said Schulte is a patriot who was wrongly accused by the agency under intense pressure to solve the embarrassing leak. The 4-week trial raised more questions than it answered and exposed alarming security lapses within the agency, she said. The government cannot tell you which of the many people with access to this data stole the classified archive, she said. It wasn't Mr. Schulte who did this. Jurors are expected to begin deliberating today. Schulte faces counts of illegal gathering of national defense information, unauthorized computer access, theft of government property, and making false statements, among other charges. Well, let's get on to our break, and when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, a Me Too day at the office. In the powerful but understated The Assistant, we get a look at a Weinstein-esque web of abuse far different from that in Bombshell or The Loudest Voice. There are no sex scenes or humiliated women commiserating. What we have is an assistant, Jane, played by Julia Garner from the Netflix series Ozark, beginning a day before dawn at an office, making coffee, fixing the copier, etc., all in the hopes of one day getting a shot at producing from the connected entertainment mogul who runs the company. She moves about her day amidst printer noises and off-camera conversations which gradually become foreground. She finds a piece of jewelry in the boss's office, engages with his wife on the phone, then with the boss about how she engaged with the wife. Then there are frat boys, plus a couple of years, who work in the office, listen in on phone calls, giggle, and give her borderline-to-meaning advice on ways to placate the big guy. Eventually, she's expected to onboard a second assistant, 18 years old and from South Dakota, and who's being housed at a 5-star hotel where the boss is known to take meetings. This causes her to go to see the HR manager, played by Matthew McFadden, who explains things with the same attitude he brings off in HBO's Succession. The published credits contain sort of a spoiler. There's no potentially oxygen-sucking male character as the boss, just a phone voice, a pivotal and bold decision from director Kitty Green that transforms the movie. The Assistant is a day-in-the-life picture. It covers no ground and reaches no conclusions, but as Garner's weary Jane makes her way home that night, still employed, character and audience have plenty to consider. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Hi, I'm Scientific American podcast editor Steve Mirsky, and here's a short piece from the February 2020 issue of the magazine in the section called Advances, Dispatches from the Frontiers of Science, Technology, and Medicine. The article is titled Quick Hits, and it's a rundown of some science and technology stories from around the globe, compiled by assistant news editor Sarah Lewin Fraser. From the U.S., off the California coast, scientists measured a blue whale's heart rate for the first time using a device attached to the animal's skin by suction cup. The heart, likely weighing hundreds of pounds, beats from 37 down to 2 times per minute, varying dramatically between diving, feeding, and surfacing. From Peru, researchers analyzing satellite and imaging data have found 143 new Nazca lines. These are large line drawings of humans, animals, and symbols etched into the Peruvian landscape millennia ago. The drawings include a humanoid figure 16 feet across, spotted by IBM's Watson AI system. From Brazil, despite the long dry spells in Brazil's Caatinga region, scientists found the tree Hymenaea cangaceira drizzles copious nectar from flowers to attract pollinating bats. A full-size tree can release 240 gallons of the stuff with 38 distinct scent compounds over a single dry season. From Norway, archaeologists' ground-piercing radar found a Viking-era ship surrounded by a filled ditch lurking below the soil of a Western Norway farm. The ship was once within a burial mound. From Jordan, researchers uncovered a two-horned figure in early Islamic ruins that may be the earliest chess piece ever found. The roughly 1,300-year-old object matches a rook found in an Iranian chess set from about 400 years later. And from Ethiopia, microbes thrive in many of Earth's harshest environments, but researchers found no life at all in briny, scorching, acidic pools near Ethiopia's Dalal volcano. Knowing the boundaries for life's adaptations helps to narrow the search for Earth-like life on other planets. That was Quick Hits by Sarah Lewin Fraser.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the third trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
No more immigrants, no more refugees. The country is full, says Donald Trump. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. But not according to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, which has announced that the country needs more immigrant workers and wants to issue more H-2B visas for temporary jobs in the United States. For immigrants, jobs in housekeeping and landscaping in restaurants, hotels, and amusement parks, including workers from Mexico and Guatemala, as well as Jamaica and South Africa.
Some of us are illegal, and some are not wanted. Our work contracts out, and we have to.
As a senior immigration analyst at the Cato Institute said, on one hand, we need more people because the country's economy is booming. And on the other hand, we say the country is full, go back. It's impossible to reconcile those positions. There is, of course, a larger point here beyond the issue of worker visas. And that is that immigrants are not the enemy of the country, as Trump insists, but rather the lifeblood of our nation and our democracy.
Adios, mis amigos, Jesus Maria. You won't have a name when you ride the big airplane, and all they will call you will be before thee.
This ACLU Minute is inspired by the enduring words of the songwriter Woody Guthrie and the voices of Arlo and Emmylou Harris.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1893. That was the day that William Greene, longtime president of the American Federation of Labor, was born in Coshocton, Ohio. Green's family were English and Welsh immigrant miners. He entered the mines at the age of 16. Before he was 20, he had become secretary of the Coshocton Progressive Miners Union. That local would eventually join the United Mine Workers of America. By 1906, Green had risen to lead the Ohio chapter of the UMWA. Less than 2 decades later, when longtime leader of the American Federation of Labor, Samuel Gompers, died, Green was named his successor. Green believed in union management cooperation. He thought labor could win more gains at the table with management than they could standing in opposition. Green helped secure some major legislative victories for labor, including the 1935 National Labor Relations Act, which strengthened collective bargaining rights. He also supported the Fair Labor Standards Act, which established the 40-hour workweek and the minimum wage. His tenure at the helm of the AFL was during some of the most tumultuous years in U.S. labor history. This was an era of massive sit-down strikes and organizing drives for workers in industries like steel, meatpacking, and the auto industry. Green supported organizing industrial workers, but the AFL's leadership at the time, by and large, favored skilled trade labor. Increasingly, Green clashed with UMWA President John L. Lewis over the question of industrial unions. This led to a split in the labor movement and the formation of the separate Congress of Industrial Organizations. Green continued to lead the AFL until his death in 1952. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on March 3rd, 2020. I'm Mark Belanger. Labor leaders are warning that sovereign debt levels around the world are dangerously high and that this may hit working people hard. To find out more about the crisis, I talked to Daniel Bertossa. Mr. Bertossa is the Assistant General Secretary of Public Services International. The PSI is the global union which represents public service unions at the world level. I asked Mr. Bertossa why sovereign debt levels are such a concern and how widespread the problem is.
Well, Mark, the problem has always been widespread. Since 1970, on average, 8 countries per annum have suffered from a sovereign debt crisis. And when you take into account their neighbours and their trading partners, most workers in their lives will feel the consequences of a sovereign debt crisis. But recently, the overall debt levels have been rising, even from those background levels. And UN figures have shown that global debt stock has risen almost 14-fold from the 1980s, when it was just $14 trillion US dollars, to almost $200 trillion US dollars in 2016. And so that's quite an incredible increase in the amount of debt that's floating around out there. And this is happening for a couple of reasons, but the main overarching reason is what we call, or what economists call, the creation of a rentier economy. And this is an economy where corporations are extracting wealth from the economy as opposed to actually creating it. And one of the reasons for this is because of the way in which debt has increased through things like financial deregulation, which has allowed an increase in risky lending and often outright speculative lending. And this has seen finance become a much, much larger part of the global economy. And at exactly the same time, governments have given away their ability to control this enormous amount of money that's floating around the world, because they've signed up to bilateral investment treaties and trade and investment agreements that mean that they've given away their capital controls. They've given away their ability to control the movements of capital in and out of their country. And in fact, what we've seen is that these movements are increasing. And so they were at about 5% of world GDP in 1990. But in 2070, these capital flows around the world are now about 20% of world GDP. And what's important as we think about this rentier economy, this economy where corporations capture wealth and as opposed to making it, is that these capital flows have risen over that period 3 times faster than GDP. So we're seeing more money moving around but we're seeing less of that money being actually used to invest in things like factories. At the same time, we're also seeing a shift in the amount of that wealth that workers are getting. So again, in the 1970s, about 55% of GDP went to workers, and by 2015, that had fallen to about 40%. And so for workers who are attempting to make ends meet or to keep up with the cost of living, workers and consumers are being forced to take out more household debt. So overall, we've got an economy that's economic growth is based on debt and extraction of wealth, not production. We've got more debt. We've got less financial regulation, less capital controls that allow governments to control this larger amount of debt. And we've got workers getting less and being forced into higher levels of household debt.
Why are labor organizations so concerned about sovereign debt?
When a national debt crisis hits, it's usually workers who suffer, and it's often not those who've assumed that debt in the first place, the private sector or the banks. And so growth drops, jobs disappear, and often inflation rises and the cost of living goes up, so workers struggle to make ends meet. And when this happens, governments will often try to balance the books. So they cut pensions, they cut public services, and they also will try to privatize, often at exactly the worst time in terms of getting a reasonable price for assets.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 31 degrees Fahrenheit. We are expected to have that high in the mid-60s as reported yesterday. Overnight lows will remain in the mid-30s or low 30s, depending. Mostly sunny conditions should prevail. Winds will be light and variable all day and all night. And all day tomorrow, where we will have some cloudy intervals tomorrow. And the highs, once again, in the mid-60s. Pollen is rated at none. Air quality index is good at 21 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is moderate at its new level of 4, as it reached yesterday, as reported here yesterday. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.31 inches. Visibility is at, right now here at the mothership, it's down to 4 miles. We have a bit of icy fog. And relative humidity is at 98%, so you'd expect that, wouldn't you? Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Okay, you got your P-tapes? I got mine. London is 48 degrees with showers in the vicinity. Paris is 49 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 53 and partly cloudy. Kyiv, 53 degrees and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 50 and fair. Hong Kong is 64 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 52 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 70 degrees with a rain shower. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and sunny. And New York is 59 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Jonathan Landay and Arshad Muhammad of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The U.S. helped fuel a dispute between the Taliban and the Afghan government over prisoner releases that threatens U.S. peace efforts by using different language in documents. It agreed with each side, sources familiar with the matter said. The U.S. Taliban deal says the Afghan government will free up to 5,000 Taliban detainees by March 10th, while the U.S.-Afghan declaration commits the Kabul government only to take part in U.S.-brokered talks on the feasibility of such a release. Do you get what they did? They told the Taliban, "Oh yeah, we've brokered a deal where you get to release 5,000 of those prisoners. They'll be released to you. Your people will come back to you. We've got that. Okay, sign here." And then they went to the Afghani government, didn't tell them anything about that, just said, "Listen, you need to talk to them about the feasibility of this." And they got the Afghani government to agree to it. And guess what? The Afghani government, the Taliban said, "We didn't agree to this." And now our bases are being bombed. And I don't know, do we get to have a drawdown like we were promised? Sources familiar with the matter identified the discrepancy as a significant potential obstacles to the talks, and by extension, Donald Trump's desire to pull U.S. forces out of Afghanistan. Mobsters always play catch-up. Leaders lead.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Will Dunham of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Half the world's sandy beaches may be wiped away by the end of the century due to rising sea levels and other climate change effects, with Australia, Canada, Chile, Mexico, China, and the United States among the hardest hit. Many beaches that attract frolicking vacationers may be turned into rocky remnants as rising seas, changing weather patterns, and other factors erode sandy shorelines that now account for more than a third of global sea coasts. Well, maybe we can just dig the sea floor and bring the sand to our rocky coasts. Touristic areas, which have already sandy beaches as their main selling point, will probably face strong consequences, says oceanographer Michaelis Vosdoukas of the European Commission's Joint Research Center in Ispra, Italy, who is the lead author of the study published in the journal Nature Climate Change. I got to tell you, Michaelis, touristic? Don't use that ever again. Don't ever. Aside from economic value, sandy shorelines play a vital environmental role. Sandy beaches are important habitats, supporting a wide range of species, like, sun-tanning couples with their little kids roasting in the hot sun. A rise in global sea levels has accelerated in recent decades, with the major causes seen as thermal expansion. Water expands as it warms, and melting of land-based ice such as glaciers and ice sheets. And researchers analyze satellite images showing shoreline changes during the past 3 decades. And guess what? Oh man, we're up the creek without a paddle. And any water either. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? So So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte coeur. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum.